This is Cardinal Brislin. And Cardinal Brislin was born in Welkom. He studied psychology at UCT. He was ordained Bishop of Kroonstad in 2006 and the Archbishop of Cape Town in 2009. He was president of the Southern African Catholic Bishops' Conference from 2013 to 2019. And in January 2018, he visited the Gaza Strip as part of the annual Holy Land Coordination, an international effort of the bishops in support of peace and communication. He was appointed a cardinal by Pope Francis on the 30th of September 2023 and is one of the only 28 cardinals in the whole of Africa. We are so privileged to have you today, and we are very honored to have you today with us, Cardinal. We would just put our hands together for the Cardinal.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And good morning to everybody. Good morning. It's very good to be with you this morning, and thank you so much for the invitation to be with you. I must apologize. I'm going to have to read my speech. I haven't got the presence of mind anymore just to be able to talk off the cuff. But it's a great pleasure to be with you, and I do trust that your discussions and deliberations will prove to be fruitful for the good of the environment and for the countries of Southern Africa. You know, remarkably, it's now 9 years since Laudate Si was first published, and its sequel, Laudate Deum, was published 1 year ago. How do we assess what has happened in the 8 years between the two documents? Pope Francis expresses some frustration in the introductory passages of Laudate Deum, last year's sequel to Laudate Si. He says, "With the passage of time, I have realized that our responses have not been adequate. While the world in which we live is collapsing and may be nearing the breaking point, in addition to this possibility, it is indubitable that the impact of climate change will increasingly prejudice the lives and families of many persons. We will feel its effects in the areas of healthcare, sources of employment, access to resources, housing, forced migrations, and so on." Laudate Deum was written largely to address why the gap between our knowledge and behavior continues. Why is there such a gap between stated commitments and fulfillment of the promises? Actions are not corresponding to the many words that are uttered. It is the Holy Father's contention that there is a need for cultural change from below. We of this generation should not be remembered by our inability to take action. But you know, while recognizing that the long road that must still be traveled, it would be incorrect not to acknowledge that progress has been made, that many eco-warriors have taken on the challenge to effect behavior change. The mere fact that this meeting is taking place with faith leaders is indicative that the message is getting across and that concern for the care of creation is increasing and has become part of mainstream thought. Not too long ago, the Greens, as they were referred to, were frequently considered to be a fringe group. That is no longer the case. And across the board, there is recognition that the world is facing an unprecedented crisis that could bring an end to human life and indeed to all life. But we all know that there is a long way to go to counteract bad habits and the greedy and selfish exploitation of the environment, and the frequent need of politicians who are always conscious of re-election to find easy and short-term solutions to boost the economy, to provide energy, or to resolve water crises. Similarly, many companies are under pressure to make big and quick profits, often at the expense of our common home. In this address, I would like to take the cue from the topic that has been given to me, the meaning of Laudato Si for Southern Africa. That frames the discussion in a particular way. The reality of present-day South Africa and other countries of the region is shaped by its past, which we could say pivoted on the 3 E's: exclusion, expropriation, and exploitation. While South Africa and other settler colonies lived this out intensely, in fact, those realities are also the contours which shape the greater hegemonies that shaped our world and largely continue to shape our world. Hence, our considerations, while intensely parochial, are also global. As such, our reflections speak also to a greater global analysis and possible solutions. So I want to suggest that the realities that shaped our history, those 3 E's of exclusion, expropriation, and exploitation, provide a framework or a hermeneutic for answering the question of 9 years of receiving the document in our context. The subtitle of the document, as is well known, is The Cry of the Poor. This is deliberate. It thus raises the core challenge embedded in the document, that while we obviously and truly need science, technical data, and expertise to explain the death trap we are hurtling into, we cannot allow elite voices to be the sole authors of the interpretations or responses to how the critical data is received. It is a reality that those with power, money, and influence have the means to shape responses which usually mute the harsh realities and solutions that might, in their eyes, reduce their influence, power, and profit. The response, the way forward, the key choices must be shaped by and be supported of those who bear the greatest burden of the ruin of our planet. To allow the powerful to frame the narrative is simply to rewrite the narrative of the past in fresh language. The integral human ecology, which undergirds the document Laudato Si, almost demands that priority is given to the situational analysis of the poor and the marginalized. We have a principle in our social teachings tradition, subsidiarity, which teaches that decisions that affect people must be thought through, planned, and activated by those closest to the issue. We need, I repeat, to be very careful about allowing our agency to be co-opted by the powerful. We need to ensure that our responses emerge bottom up and respond to real needs of those on the ground. This of necessity means enhancing agency, the agency of those who are on the periphery. We need to be careful in this regard of speaking too glibly about being the voice of the voiceless, unless it is in the context of it being enhancing and creating the means for the voiceless to speak for themselves. We ourselves must not presume that we have the ability to express the life experience of communities. Rather, our role is to ensure that they have the space to speak and that they are listened to. In Southern Africa, this means supporting local initiatives and community groups that, for example, have spoken out against underwater mining along the last of our pristine coasts, fracking, and unregulated mining. These community voices and critical social action at local level are key to enhancing agency and provide the framework of journeying with communities. There is some considerable merit in broadly pursuing developmental models such as the social inventory, which follows a variation, as I understand it, of the see, judge and act methodology. It encourages people to make decisions which are appropriate for their own communities, while enhancing equality, freedom and participation, which are important benchmarks for assessing decisions, and then finding the local resources to implement those decisions. Where others can support and complement this process, where and when necessary, then a new, more respectful dynamic of social analysis and action can result. I believe that as faith communities, this community support is one critical area of social engagement and a key way to environmental responsibility. That is a pastoral and indeed a theological imperative, and an essential means for faith leaders to stand in solidarity with those who bear the brunt of the ruinous situation that has and continues to evolve. We cannot be neutral as we witness the devastation that is happening around us and the suffering it is causing to those who are already heavily burdened. At a practical level, many have been sensitive to basic responses, JoJo tanks, solar panels, and sensitivity in our new buildings and constructions, sensitivity to the environment, trying to cut down our carbon footprint and the like. And of course we must continue to practice that and encourage that. However, we also need to be more intentional in strengthening our advocacy at all levels. Is it working?
Yes.
That does help a little bit, we hope.
Testing? Yes. Sorry, I presume you wouldn't like me to start at the beginning. So yes, we must continue with JoJo tanks and solar panels and whatever we can do to protect the environment. But we do also need more intentional and strengthening of our advocacy at all levels of government and corporate decision making, where policy choices are made and where policy is developed. There is some engagement around Parliament and national government, but the same advocacy needs to happen at local and provincial level. Our structures at all levels allow for public participation in the various processes, and we need to be far more intentional and structured about pursuing those possibilities. I think particularly of local level, where a great deal more of the tire hitting the tar happens, and where there is a more direct link with councillors. It is in that domain that so much more needs to happen. Since faith communities are present at local levels, there is a strong argument to be made for rigorous ecumenical and interfaith advocacy around basic environmental issues. This really needs to be strengthened and promoted. Similarly, while faith leaders should not attempt to be the voice of the voiceless, and while it is imperative to accept the responsibility of advocacy, there is also the possibility of a facilitating role that faith leaders can play in dialogue between communities, corporate decision makers, and government. Faith leaders are generally trusted in society, and where there is dispute, the ideal of finding a win-win solution should not be dismissed. Ultimately, we are seeking to serve the common good in its complexity and entirety, and a constitutive element of that is creating a just economy, which can only be achieved through engagement and dialogue. Exclusion of any stakeholder in that process will be fruitless, but accepting that there are competing interests, creating a safe environment for dialogue may produce good results. Faith leaders could be in a position to provide that safe environment and to facilitate discussion and dialogue. So we look to you now for the next few days for direction on the way forward. the priority issues, strategies, and the like. It would be important also for those of us who are in leadership to speak with one voice on the priorities, strategies, and programs that are necessary. It would be a useful pedagogical tool if all the churches in an area ran or campaigned on the same issue, used the same biblical and scriptural studies and catechetical tools on various social media platforms and in person, which could then, for example, be escalated by the community into action with local government and thus harness leverage. Faith leaders can be the public face of campaigns and programs. They can be the ones to engage in dialogue and to shoulder the responsibility of advocacy. However, faith leaders by themselves will not be able to achieve this unless they have a support base of those who are actually doing the work, if I can put it like that. Those who have the passion to implement the strategies and to overcome the obstacles on the ground. Ultimately, we should not forget that our mission of caring for our common home is one of conversion of heart. It is to enable people to see and appreciate the earth in a different way, to understand the interconnectedness between humankind, all other forms of life, and the earth itself. Indeed, the interconnectedness of the cosmos. It is to lead people away from a utilitarian worldview, which is all the more difficult in a growingly urbanized world, to lead them to the value of inherent beauty and of what can be rather than what is. But there is also an interconnectedness of all struggles, and I think we should not forget that. The struggle for clean air, unpolluted rivers, is the same struggle of the indigenous people adjacent to a mining site as their struggle against gender-based violence, for example. Our bigger picture analysis must keep these threads together and not to reduce our struggle into a silo activism. Our struggle for the environment is connected to the other struggles, and we cannot work in a silo. Pope Francis has called for a Jubilee year. Normally, we have a Jubilee year in the Catholic Church every 25 years. One of the areas that we must of necessity give witness is in the area of the environment, especially as it will also be the 10th anniversary of Laudato Si. And so we must ensure that its challenges become part of our Jubilee celebrations. It would be all the more powerful if we did this together and left an indelible sign of our response to the encyclical and the Jubilee year. Notwithstanding many other actions that could be undertaken, perhaps a simple and achievable symbolic action resulting from this conference could be the planting of trees, perhaps 2,025 trees. Thank you once again for your invitation to be with you. I wish you every blessing in your discussions and trust that there will be a renewed impulse for concrete steps to be taken to care for our common home. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I didn't have a PowerPoint.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to personally thank Cardinal Brislin for that treatise on why us being here together is so important. I personally think he captured everything. He captured it for us. What we need to do, what we need to do, why you as faith leaders are called to be here today. So I want to really thank you, Cardinal, for setting the tone for our time together. I mean, to tell you the truth, I thought he was going to give us more of a theological, focused speech, but I was I felt that you captured the essence of why SAFCEI, the Southern African Faith Communities of the Environment Institute, was founded, because it's for exactly those reasons, exactly as you put it. So I just want to say I'm Francesca De Gasperis, for those of you who I haven't met, and I'm the Executive Director of SAFCEI. And so I wanted to personally welcome you all as well. And I just got so inspired by the Cardinal that I interrupted my colleagues and said, no, I'm going to jump up and say something now. Oh. And my phone agrees with me. So thank you so much again, Cardinal, for being with us this morning, for starting us off on this very important journey together. For us to have bishops together like this is very special indeed. We have never achieved this before. And it's not because we don't see you all as being extremely important. In fact, you're quite a difficult bunch of people to get together. So I just wanted to just appreciate that you've made time. Some of you weren't with us last night, so I just wanted to appreciate you who've also come this morning, because it's a really special moment for us in our region, and I don't want to underemphasize that. We often say a small group of committed people can really change this world. But for us to have this kind of leadership from the various different churches really is a moment for us to say, how do we go forward together? And that's why we really were so pleased when the Cardinal could squeeze us in to set us off on our journey together. It's our first step. And our second step this morning is going to be with Professor Colleen Vogel, who stood up earlier and mentioned about the lack of signage. That also inspired me to stand up and do a little bit more signage because, because at SAFCEI the buck stops with me. If there isn't a sign, I better get up there and start waving my hands around. So here I am. I want to just introduce Professor Vogel. I hope I'm pronouncing your